The first laugh hit harder than any bullet. I was standing at the bar when the Navy SEAL raised his glass and grinned. "Hey, Angela Nelson," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's your call sign? Or do computers like you even get one?" The room burst out laughing. That kind of laughter, it doesn't fade. It brands you. No one spoke up. Not even the man whose life I once saved. He looked at his drink, pretending not to know me. In that moment, I felt something break, not in anger, but in clarity. They didn't see me as a soldier, as a leader, or even as human. Just a woman in the wrong room. I set my glass down slowly. "You want to know my call sign?" I said. He kept smiling. He shouldn't have. Morning in Norfolk carried the kind of quiet that didn't need permission to exist. The water outside my window barely moved, the pier lights fading against the first streak of daylight. I poured my coffee and waited for the first ship's horn to cut through the silence. To most people, it was background noise. To me, it was order. I'd grown up on the rhythm of that sound. My father used to say, "The ocean trained you better than any commander. It taught you patience, or it swallowed you whole." My mother stitched wounds and saved men who thought they couldn't be saved. Between the two of them, I learned that strength wasn't noise. It was precision. At 20, I joined the Navy, drawn to the unseen parts of warfare, the ones fought through frequencies, not fire. I'd spent years connecting signals to survival, watching lives depend on data that blinked across my screen. Once in a dust-choked corner of the Middle East, a unit of SEALs called for help over a dying frequency. 90 seconds later, they were alive again. Their official report called it a recovered channel. My name never appeared. After 8 years overseas, I came home to a quiet office at the Naval Signal Center in Norfolk. It suited me, the hum of machines, the discipline of silence. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. "Commander Nelson, we need you back in Coronado, California. You'll lead cyber defense training for SEAL operations." The line went dead, but the past didn't. Coronado, the same base that had once sent the team I saved and never knew it. I stared out the window. The sea looked calm, but I could still hear the echo of that broken voice from Kabul. "If anyone can hear us, we're dead." They lived. No one ever asked who heard them. I folded my uniform, slipped my dog tag into the pocket, and closed my suitcase. They won't remember me. But I'll remember them. The cabin door sealed behind me as the plane lifted through the clouds, carrying a truth I'd never been allowed to tell. The California sun cut through the airport glass, sharp and golden. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel, too familiar to feel new. Coronado shimmered beyond the bay, the kind of base built for men trained to shoot first and talk later. By noon, I was walking into the briefing room, assigned for my new course, Cyber Tactical Security Integration. Commander Owen Briggs stood waiting. The last time I'd heard his voice, it was calling for help through static and chaos. Now it carried the lazy confidence of someone who'd already forgotten. He offered his hand with a smirk. "Glad to have you here, Commander. Hope the AC isn't too cold for you." The room laughed. I smiled once. I've survived worse temperatures than sarcasm. The laughter faded, but his eyes held that same dismissive spark. He had no idea who stood in front of him. During the meeting, I warned them about a vulnerability in the simulation network. Owen barely listened. "We've got it covered," he said. The same words that almost got them killed years ago. Later, while teaching, a young lieutenant named Eli Hunt studied me too closely. "Ma'am, were you ever in Kabul? I think I heard your voice once." The room went silent. "Let's keep that classified, Lieutenant." They laughed again, except Eli. He already knew. That evening, I noticed a framed photo on Owen's desk, his old team, the ones I'd saved. Beneath it, "To the ghost in the machine." The ghost had returned, and no one recognized her. Driving home, the radio crackled. "Security breach reported at Pacific Naval Simulation Base." My chest went cold. Something inside the system had woken up again, and it was moving fast. Hours later, the base was quiet except for the low hum of machines. On my monitor blinked red text, "Unauthorized signal detected." My reflection stared back the ghost I'd once been. The intrusion traced to a foreign IP scanning SEAL training data. Every time I flagged it, the system erased my alert, dismissed by Commander Briggs. He was ignoring it again. I copied the logs, filed a report, and shut it down. Next morning in the briefing, I raised the alarm. Owen chuckled. Nelson's good with numbers, but this is real combat. Laughter again. I stayed silent, watching them dig their own grave. That night, Eli came to me quietly. You were right, ma'am. Someone's spoofing our drills. You didn't hear that from me, I said. At least one man still listened. I opened an old file labeled Ghost Net. The pattern matched perfectly, same attack method from Kabul, same arrogance, same blindness. I leaned back, eyes on the black ocean beyond the window. It's happening again, I thought. On the final page of the old report glowed my call sign, Operator Phantom 9. Maybe the ghost isn't done haunting yet. The screen went dark, and the sea whispered back. The next morning, the air in the mess hall carried that kind of quiet laughter that cuts sharper than words. From somewhere behind me, a voice whispered just loud enough to sting. Careful, the data queen might hack your coffee machine. I didn't react. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettles bullies more than anger ever could. Still, it burned. These weren't strangers, they were men whose lives I had once saved without them ever knowing. During the tactical briefing, I presented a report on an irregular data stream in the SEAL simulation network. I showed them the code patterns, the repeating frequencies, the same structure I had once intercepted in Kabul. Owen Briggs leaned back, arms folded, voice smooth but smug. Relax, Nelson. We handle pressure, not passwords. The room erupted. I let the laughter run its course. Then I said quietly, and pressure kills slower than ignorance. It silenced the room faster than any order could. I gathered my notes and walked out, pulse steady but cold. The next day proved me right. During a coastal drill near San Clemente, the team lost contact. We've lost channel, no GPS, anybody. Copy? Owen's voice cracked through static. I stepped forward, hands on the keyboard. 90 seconds of command line chaos later, the screen blinked green. The team was safe, again. Good catch, Nelson. Lucky timing, he muttered. It wasn't luck. It was math. The room fell silent. They couldn't decide whether to thank me or resent me. That night, I sat alone on the pier, watching the reflection of baselights ripple over black water. You can save a man's life and still not earn his respect, I thought. I didn't want credit. I wanted peace, the kind that comes when truth no longer needs witnesses. Owen walked past me, stopped for a second, then kept going. His silence wasn't ignorance anymore. It was guilt. And that was enough. By morning, the silence had turned into exile. Conversations died when I entered the room. Eyes flicked away, pretending I wasn't there. I'd survived worse kinds of loneliness. In class, Mason Cole, the youngest SEAL, smirked. Ma'am, can you teach us how to delete our mistakes too? Laughter burst out. I met his gaze. No. But I can teach you how not to repeat them. The room froze, and for once he had nothing to say. That night, I checked the system logs and found the cause of the breach. Mason's own careless access key. Reporting it would destroy him. I hesitated, then erased the record. Protect the mission, not the ego. The next day, Owen joked again. Be careful, boys. Our Phantom Lady might ghost us. They laughed, and I replied softly. You have no idea how close that nickname is. They thought it was a joke. I knew it wasn't. Later that night, I opened my old Kabul journal. I was a ghost to them. Maybe ghosts exist to remind the living what silence can do. Eli stopped by uneasy. Ma'am, rumor says you faked the breach to look smart. People mistake calm for manipulation, I told him. Let them. As I left my office, Mason and 2 others were laughing down the hall. The Phantom Lady thinks she's a hero. I kept walking, but Eli turned on them, voice cutting, like a whip. She saved you twice, Cole. Show some damn respect. The corridor went still. I didn't turn around. My eyes stung, but my back stayed straight. The whisper had finally met its echo. At home, I set my dog tag on the table. The name caught the light, A. Nelson Phantom 9. One day they'll understand, not because I speak, but because I stopped needing to. Coronado glittered that Friday night, the kind of brightness that made people forget how dark the ocean could get. The team dragged me to the Pacific Anchor Bar, their favorite spot to drink loud and talk louder. Refusing wasn't an option, it would only prove I didn't belong. I wore jeans, a black shirt, hair tied tight. On the outside, I blended in. Inside, I carried the same cold silence they'd never understand. Beer spilled, laughter echoed. They toasted to drills and near misses, then shifted to their favorite joke, me. Data Queen, Ghost Operator, Phantom Lady. Mason Cole, drunk and smug, raised his glass. Hey, Nelson, tell us your call sign. Or did the computer give you one? The group laughed, careless and cruel. Owen Briggs, sitting nearby, smirked. Go easy, boys. She's sensitive. It was meant to sound kind, but it landed like a blade. I looked at them, the same men whose lives I'd saved without them knowing, the same voices that had once screamed for help through static. I set my drink down, voice calm. You want to know my call sign? Silence? It's Phantom 9. The laughter stopped. Eli Hunt rose stunned. The Phantom 9 from Kabul. That was you. Owen went white, realization crawling across his face. That's classified, Nelson. You shouldn't joke about that. You're right, I said. It was until tonight. Even the jukebox seemed to die. A senior petty officer stepped forward, eyes wide. Commander Nelson, my brother was in that team. You saved him. Every face turned toward me, heavy with shock and guilt. I didn't feel victorious, just hollow. It took humiliation to make them listen. I walked out into the night. Behind me, Owen's voice cracked. Angela. I didn't look back. You didn't ask, Owen. That's the difference. By sunrise, the base was quiet in the way shame makes things quiet. Some nodded as I passed. Others couldn't meet my eyes. The truth had spread faster than any lie ever could. In headquarters, a file waited on the desk, Operation GhostNet, Operator Phantom 9. Commander Nelson, your call sign was classified, they said. You revealed it. I answered simply, I didn't reveal it. I just stopped denying it. An inquiry followed. Owen testified, claiming he never knew who saved them. Eli spoke next. Sir, it was her. I saw it. The silence that followed was heavier than judgment. Later, Rear Admiral Kennedy called me in. Commander, we've known for years. You kept your oath. That's what matters. He handed me a transfer order. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to Washington Joint Intelligence Division. Outside, Owen waited. His voice barely carried. I never thanked you. You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself honesty. That night, I sat by the pier moonlight, catching my dog tag. It's over, I whispered. But the sea answered softly, not yet. The waves rolled in slow, steady, like truth itself, inevitable, patient, and impossible to silence. 2 years later, Washington moved like a living map of quiet decisions and loud consequences. I led the Red Line Task Force, the small team that watched the Navy's drones so the rest of the fleet could sleep. At sea, we had fought storms. In D.C., we fought certainty. One November night, the console spat an alert and intrusion on a fire control channel. The screen painted Tripoli as the target. My stomach dropped when pattern analysis lit up coordinates shifted by exactly 400 meters, the same error signature that had haunted Coronado. If the strike went through, civilians would die. I took it up the chain. The colonel on duty pushed back, insisting they had field confirmation and to proceed. I was blunt, the data stream was compromised, and the strike had to be aborted. He barked that orders stood. I answered that saving lives was an order too. 10 minutes ticked like a detonator. With command stalled, I executed an override on a redundant route and locked control long enough to freeze the drone mid-flight. Alarms screamed, radios filled with accusations. A technician shaking announced that the override had come from me. Admiral Kennedy patched in and asked for my reasoning. I explained that the Red Line code had been cloned from the Coronado breach 2 years earlier, and that firing would kill innocents. There was silence as he reviewed the feed. Then he confirmed the abort. When the logs reconciled, the map showed fighters moving in the old pattern. Our decision had averted a catastrophe. Kennedy told me competence does not shout. It saves lives. That night, the promotion paperwork waited on my desk. I watched the Pentagon lights and thought about the men who once laughed at my silence. Now that same silence had kept them alive. Late in the fall, the office was quiet enough to hear the faint hum of the city beyond the Pentagon walls. My aide announced a visitor. When the door opened, Owen Briggs stepped inside. The uniform he wore looked worn at the seams, the kind that had seen too many deployments and too many regrets. It had been 2 years since I'd last seen him. He stood in front of my desk, but didn't meet my eyes. The silence between us was heavy, old, and unfinished. "You didn't have to humiliate me that night," he said finally. I leaned back in my chair, watching him struggle with the words. "I didn't," I said. "The truth did." He nodded once, jaw tight. "You were right, Angela. About everything. About respect, about silence." I thought strength was noise. "No, Owen," I told him. "Strength is clarity." He let out a long breath, then reached into his jacket and placed a small card on my desk, a photograph of a SEAL training class. "We changed the curriculum," he said. "Intelligence is part of every SEAL course now." I studied the photo. The faces were young, determined, unscarred. "That's how you say sorry," I said quietly. He smiled, the first genuine one I'd ever seen from him. Then his expression darkened again. "You know there are still people who think you pulled that Phantom 9 thing for fame. They're free to think whatever helps them sleep," I answered. "But I know better," he said. We both went silent. For once, it wasn't the kind of silence that hurt. It was the kind that settled things, the kind that meant we'd finally stopped fighting ghosts. Before leaving, Owen hesitated at the door. "If you ever wondered whether it was worth it," I stopped him. "It was. Because you're here." He didn't argue, just nodded and left, letting the door close softly behind him. The setting sun stretched across the office, washing everything in gold: the desk, the wall, the nameplate that read Cap Teats, Angela Nelson, Deputy Director, Naval Intelligence. For a long moment, I stared out the window. The harbor below shimmered like a memory ship's, aligned in perfect stillness. The kind of order you only earn after chaos. My reflection merged with theirs, part of the world I'd once had to fight to be seen in. Forgiveness isn't noise either, I thought. It's just the absence of war. And for the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt complete. 10 years later, Norfolk smelled the same salt metal and something like home. The morning light struck the harbor in thin gold lines as the Navy band tuned up on deck. Rows of young officers stood straight in their new uniforms, faces shining with the mix of pride and nerves I remembered too well. I walked up to the podium, the breeze catching the white of my jacket. Rear Admiral Angela Nelson. The title still felt like borrowed language for something I'd spent a lifetime earning. I looked out at the ocean of faces, men and women, who hadn't yet learned that victory often comes wrapped in silence. My speech was short. It didn't need to be long. I talked about duty, about listening harder than you speak, about knowing when to be loud and when to be still. They applauded politely, not realizing those words had been carved out of years of being ignored. After the ceremony, as the crowd scattered across the pier, a young lieutenant approached. Her uniform was too crisp, her eyes too bright. "Ma'am, I joined because of you," she said. "Because of the Phantom story." I smiled. "Then don't be like me. Be better. And be quieter only when it counts." She hesitated, then handed me a small pin, a silver crest shaped like a circuit fused with an anchor. "Operation Redline Protocol," she said. "It's part of SEAL training now." At the bottom, etched in fine print, were 5 words. "In honor of Phantom 9. We don't forget ghosts anymore, ma'am." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The past, once buried under ridicule and secrecy, had become part of their foundation. They'd built a doctrine out of a woman they once refused to see. I closed my hand around the pin, feeling its weight light, but not small. As the crowd thinned, I turned toward the back row. Owen Briggs stood there in civilian clothes, his posture still impossibly straight. Retirement had softened him. The arrogance had long washed away. When our eyes met, he raised his hand in salute. I returned it sharp and certain. No bitterness left. No apology needed. Down by the dock, Eli Hunt waited. He'd traded his combat gear for teaching blues, the kind of man who carried respect the way others carried medals. We walked side by side along the wooden planks, the tide lapping beneath us. "Funny how a bar joke turned into a Navy doctrine," he said. I laughed, the sound low and easy. "Revenge is loud," I told him. "Redemption whispers." He nodded. And for a while, we just listened to the creak of ropes, the hum of ships, the distant gulls calling above the bay. There was nothing left to prove. When he left, I stayed behind. The pier stretched into the water like a bridge to another life. The sea was calm today, the way it only is when the storm has already passed somewhere else. I stood there until the chatter from the crowd faded and the world went quiet again. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old dog tag edges, worn smooth with time. The letters were faint but still there, A. Nelson, Phantom 9. I turned it over in my hand, letting it catch the morning light. You don't have to shout the truth, I whispered. You just have to live it. The wind moved through the rigging above me, blending with the steady rhythm of the waves. It was the same sound I'd heard all my life, the sound of duty, of memory of peace. The sound of water. As the scene faded to the soft rush of the tide, the world narrowed to one quiet truth. Rear Admiral Angela Nelson Rhett, founder of Redline Integrity Protocol U.S. Navy, and beneath it, only the ocean answered.